This is, you see, a little bit of the autism trait can give you an advantage in something like the technical field. You get too much of the trait, and then you're nonverbal. Maybe you have a seizure disorder or epilepsy or something like that on top of it. It's a continuum of traits. But I want to see, I also get asked about disclosure. Even today, if I'm on a plane and they haven't seen the movie or anything and they ask what I do, I just say I'm a college professor and I don't disclose anything. And then when the emergence book first came out, I didn't disclose anything to the plants. Then gradually it comes out. If they know about it, then we talk about it. If they don't know about it, I think in some cases, I have dads where their kid gets diagnosed. Should they get diagnosed? They probably are Asperger. I get worried about what that's going to do to your health insurance because it made a mess out of mine. Big, gigantic mess. But maybe it might be better in some cases to disclose some specific thing you need, like fluorescent lights bother you, or you can't multitask, or you want to have written instructions. Well, then you just say to your boss, well, email it to me. Then I've got it to refer to. But the thing that really I found, helped me to excel was I was very good at what I did. I was very good at what I do. It got down to selling my work. And proving that I wasn't stupid was a gigantic motivator for selling my work.
Okay, got a lot of questions here. Next is, if you were in school now, what advice would you give to teachers?
Develop the area of strength. Too often in special ed, we pound away on the disability. Algebra was just impossible. I should have been jumped to geometry and trig. That wasn't done. That was a mistake. Develop the area of strength. I can't emphasize that enough. Take the kid's fixations and broaden them out. He likes trains. Let's read a book about trains. If all he wants to do is draw pictures of trains, let's do the train station. Let's do a picture of some place the train goes to. In other words, get an associative link back to the thing that he's interested in.
Okay. What can the community do to make sure that our kids can find jobs? You talked a lot about employment.
Well, we need to find bosses that are going to tolerate some eccentricity. And, it's finding employers that are good. I want to commend the Walgreen company, the drugstore chain. They've redone the computers in their warehouses so you don't have to be able to read to do the warehouse computers. And I've asked, companies have been very progressive about employment, how well the warehouse managers and things, how easy is it to train the warehouse managers? They said 80% of them is fine, 10 or 20% are bad. And you know what? It's the same thing I find in my livestock handling. You got about 10 or 20% of people, maybe they just shouldn't be touching cattle because they're not nice to them. and in working on the animal welfare programs with McDonald's on auditing meat plants, there were 75 approved suppliers. 3 plant managers had to be removed out of 75. That's, they just wouldn't change their old-fashioned ways of doing things. We've got to show people that, how this person can be a really good employee. In the tech community, get them involved with the tech community because they've already got tons of people on the spectrum. Okay?
Okay, so what worries you most about the education today of children that are on the autistic spectrum?
Well, the problem, that's too broad because I have found that it so much depends upon the particular teacher and the particular schools. One district's just awful, the next district's just great. One school's dreadful, another school over in another town is just fine. So many things depend upon the particular people and the particular place.
Okay, I know that you talked about this last night in our group, but one person's asking as a teacher specifically about sensory integration and how the best way to work with students that have those kinds of issues. Well,
sensory problems are really real, and they're not limited just to autism. All kinds of learning difficulties have sensory issues, dyslexia, ADHD, tons of different kinds of developmental disorders have sensory difficulties. Sound sensitivity, loud noises hurt the ears. I had problems with that. A lot of brain problems, you don't hear auditory detail. In other words, you don't hear the hard consonant sounds. And my speech teacher would enunciate things like, she'd say, kappa, or dogga. She'd carefully enunciate the consonants. so I could hear them. Because when grown-ups yacked really, really fast, I didn't understand what they said. When they talked slowly to me, then I understood. Some kids have visual processing problems. Now, I don't have this. Sensory problems are very variable. One kid may have a lot of auditory problems, another kid has a lot of visual problems. And some kids absolutely cannot tolerate 60-cycle fluorescent lights. And people ask me, what would you put in a school or something for kids with autism and developmental problems? No 60-cycle fluorescent lights. So what are we going to do to be green and be energy conservation? Well, you're going to have to get electronic fluorescent lights that cycle at a much, much higher frequency. That is probably the single worst thing in the classroom. I had a dyslexic student that just spaced out and couldn't think when she had to be around 60-cycle fluorescent lights because the whole classroom was flickering like a discotheque. It was absolutely horrible. And some kids, when they go to read, the print like jiggles on the page, and they're looking at the corner of their eye all the time. They might be terrified of escalators because they can't tell how to get on and off of them. Let's talk about some simple things we can do for those kids. Laptop computer screens don't flicker. TV-type computer screens flicker. Now we've got all these new high-def screens. I'm not sure about those because I no longer have the students to test them on. But a laptop or an LCD screen, that's your gold standard. So any new screen technology that comes out has to be equal to or better than a laptop. And some people are really helped by the Erlen-colored glasses, where you try on different pale-colored sunglasses, pink and lavender, until you find the ones where the print no longer jiggles. That really helped my dyslexic student. I find in my livestock design class, out of 35 students, I have one every semester that's got this problem. And there's a certain kind of really messy way, awful way they do their drawings that I can tell. Okay, if I ask them to draw a line and put 3 half circles like this on it, just freehand, they can't do it. This has nothing to do with knowing about cattle. It's all over the place like this. I send them out, go down to Walmart, go shopping for some like pale pink or pale purple sunglasses, and they come back and they tell me now they can see better at night when they're driving, and they can print no longer jiggles on the page. And one little girl could tolerate only 5 minutes at a Walmart or a Target store, and after getting some little pink glasses, she could do an hour. Now, the advantage of using Erlen lenses is they can give you the exact precise color. So that works better than just buying the approximate color. I was a pressure seeker. A lot of kids are calmed by deep pressure over wide areas of the body. If you use weighted vests, it's 20 minutes on, and then you got to get it off for a while. Then people ask me, well, what about a weighted blanket at night? Well, he's asleep after 20 minutes, hopefully, so that's fine. But the mistake people make is leaving it on too long. Sometimes sitting on a ball, doing balancing, can kind of stabilize the nervous system, because a lot of kids, their hearing is like a bad mobile phone connection. So when you do some of these sensory integration things, it's sort of like taking that phone outside and it gives you a better little connection. And you don't have as much scrambling. There's a lot of these kids, this whole sensory systems are scrambled, all the incoming stuff is scrambled. It's just a mess. One of the areas where I would put a lot of research money in is the sensory issues. They can be very debilitating. How can you socialize if you can't tolerate being in a noisy restaurant or a noisy stadium or a place like that? And I think the things the OTs do with sensory integration, I think that's part of a good program. And a lot of schools, you can only get it for an hour a week. And what I tell parents is, go in and see what the OT's doing, and then you do a whole bunch more of it. And then you're getting the professional direction from an OT. And I want things done with professional direction. But a lot of places, as I travel around the country, they get like 2 hours of speech a week and maybe 1 hour of OT. I say to parents, go find out what that teacher's doing and then do a whole bunch more of it. Because you've got to get the hours in with these little kids.
Okay. It says, I just read an article by a nonverbal autistic who made a point of saying that he felt autism was more a physical challenge than a neurological. He wrote that he knew in his mind what he was supposed to try to do, eye contact, stop flapping, for example, but couldn't get his body to react. As a high-functioning autistic, what are your thoughts as to how much you are affected by any mind-body disconnect?
That's really interesting. And what I have kind of found as some of these sensory problems get worse, the social parts of the brain actually tend to sort of be normal. Years ago, I made this graph where sort of like as the sensory problems got worse, you know, he's right, because he can't control it. And there's people that are nonverbal where they can't, the circuits that integrate movement and stuff like that are completely messed up. You know, if you're interested in learning more about some of those things, there's a book by Tito Mukhopadhyay, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And he describes fractured sensory processing, and anyone who's working with people that are nonverbal needs to read that. I think it's an excellent, excellent book. You see, the thing is, I think autism kind of can be different things to different people. For him, it's more of a physical problem. For somebody that's a real smart Aspie, you know, kind of a geek, yeah, there's a bunch of social circuits are gone, and they don't have the movement problems. I think.
Okay, yeah. Person asks, says, my daughter, this is along the same lines, my daughter has severe autism and does not speak. How can they, as parents, better understand what she is thinking? Kind of looking.
Well, there are some that can't speak. They can learn to type, and I think the keyboard needs to be introduced. Just start out getting them to, you know, request, starting with nouns, just learning whole words, and don't worry about proper typing. One finger's fine. And you know, if a kid isn't speaking by about 6, I think when you start working with the, you know, keyboard, I think there's also a need for, you know, better augmentative devices. You know, looking at places where to put money in for research. Sensory is a big area where I'd put money in, and then also some better ways so maybe they can just think about something and they can get the computer to do what they want.
Well, what advice do you have for parents who are making the decisions about what kinds of medications, diets, or treatments are appropriate for their children?
I am really sick and tired of all the fight between conventional and regular medication. Sometimes a little of each is best. I'm appalled at the amount of heavy-duty psychiatric drugs handed out to 5-year-olds like candy. As I travel around the country and you've got 5-year-olds loaded up on Risperdal, I think that's absolutely atrocious. So my bias is going to be very young kids, let's try some of the diets. They're gluten-free, they're dairy-free. That really helps for some kids. And a specific carbohydrate where you take out, it's sort of like an Atkins, and you take out a lot of the white carbs and sugar. I'm kind of doing that right now to control my yeast infections. And I've pretty well have taken gluten out, but not casein. And that's helped me. Plenty of exercise. These kids are not getting enough exercise. Things like the fish oil supplements, the research is showing very clearly those are good for the brain. But there's way too much sugar and high glycemic carbs in the American diet, and there's a brand new paper in the American Journal of Psychiatry that shows that that they'll get kind of a crappy diets related to depression. You know, so let's do some of those things first. Now, when I got into puberty, I started having absolute horrible anxiety attacks, and the movie showed me pre-antidepressant medication. And in my early 30s, I went on disipramine, which is an old-fashioned tricyclic antidepressant, and it made the horrible panic attacks and anxiety go away. I wouldn't be here now if I hadn't gone on that medication. You know, a little tiny dose of Prozac or Zoloft, that can cut the anxiety. The mistake that's made with people on the spectrum is giving too much. I've had 100 parents say to me, ooh, little dose was wonderful. We doubled the dose, now he can't sleep, and he acts like he's drunk 500 cups of coffee. You know, oftentimes people on the spectrum need like half to 1/4 the starter dose of something like Prozac. The other thing is there's a lot of old drugs that really work. You know, where today, of course, the drug companies are pushing things like Abilify and Seroquel because they're patented, but those have much more severe side effects than maybe a little bit of Prozac or maybe a little bit of one of the anti-seizure drugs. You know, some of those can be helpful. In Thinking in Pictures, I have a whole section on medication called A Believer in Biochemistry. The other thing is, you got to get logical. Try one thing at a time and try to figure out what's working. Now, obviously, of course, I'd rather have scientific articles, you know, for evidence, but the problem that is autism is so variable that when you do a scientific study, you're putting apples, oranges, and pears all together, and so you might try something like the colored glasses and you show they don't work. Because if you had 10 people with autism, maybe they only work on 2. But I'm talking about going down and doing a screening test at the local Walmart, which costs you absolutely nothing.